The bruises were carefully hidden, long sleeves, practiced smiles, silence perfected over years. Alara Voss had become a ghost in her own life, invisible by necessity, untouchable by design. She never expected anyone to see through the armor she'd built, especially not him, especially not Dominic Vale, the man whose name alone made grown men flinch, whose empire was built on fear and absolute control. But when their eyes met across his estate's marble floors, something shifted. He saw everything she'd tried to hide. And in a world where being seen meant danger, that changed everything. If you want to see how Alara's story unfolds, how an invisible girl and a dangerous man forged something neither expected, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. Sit. The rain fell in sheets against the manor's towering windows, each drop a tiny percussion against glass that cost more than most people earned in a year. Alara Voss stood in the servants' entrance, water dripping from her coat onto imported Italian tile, and wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory from just 3 hours ago, weak and apologetic from the hospital bed. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I know you didn't want this. But we can't afford to lose this position. Please, just until I can work again." A broken leg. A fall down the stairs. That's what her mother had told the doctors. That's what she always told them. Alara knew better. "You must be the replacement." The voice cut through her thoughts like a blade. Cold. Precise. The kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to command absolute attention. She turned to find a woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, dark uniform immaculate despite the late hour. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, according to the brief phone call that had summoned Alara here. "Yes, ma'am, Alara Voss. My mother is—" "I know who your mother is." Mrs. Chen's eyes traveled over Alara with clinical assessment. "She's been with us for 3 years, reliable, discreet. I hope you inherited those qualities." "I won't cause any trouble." Alara kept her voice soft, her posture non-threatening. The skills of invisibility came naturally after 23 years of practice. "I just need to know what to do." Mrs. Chen's expression didn't soften, but something flickered in her eyes, not quite approval, but perhaps acknowledgement. "The rules are simple. You arrive before Mr. Vale wakes. You leave after he retires. You clean what needs cleaning, serve what needs serving, and speak only when spoken to. Most importantly, you do not ask questions about his business, his visitors, or anything else you might see or hear in this house. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear." "Good. Mr. Vale values his privacy above all else. This house operates on discretion." Mrs. Chen gestured toward the interior. "Come. I'll show you what needs to be done before morning." The Vale estate was exactly what Alara had imagined, and nothing like it at all. From the outside, it looked like old money, a sprawling mansion of stone and elegance perched on 10 acres of manicured grounds. But inside, it was a study in contrasts. Priceless art hung on walls that had seen violence. Marble floors gleamed beneath the feet of men who carried guns under tailored suits. Luxury built on brutality. Dominic Vale's empire wasn't a secret exactly. Everyone in the city knew what he was. The police knew. The politicians knew. They all looked the other way because Dominic Vale had made himself too powerful to touch, too connected to challenge, too dangerous to cross. And Alara was now living in the heart of it. "This is the main living area," Mrs. Chen explained, her sensible shoes clicking across the floor. "Fresh flowers daily, white roses only. Mr. Vale has specific preferences. The study is off limits unless you're explicitly summoned. The dining room sees use twice a day when he's in residence. The library—" She stopped abruptly. A man stood at the top of the grand staircase, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Alara's entire year of nursing school tuition. His dark hair was swept back, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, his eyes, those eyes. Even from this distance, Alara felt their weight. Gray like storm clouds, intelligent and piercing, they swept over the scene below with the casual authority of someone who owned everything he surveyed, including people. "Mr. Vale," Mrs. Chen's voice carried the barest hint of deference. "I apologize for the disturbance. I was just orienting the new—" "I know." His voice was deeper than Alara expected, rich and controlled. He descended the stairs with fluid grace, each step deliberate. Your mother. How is she? It took Alara a moment to realize he was speaking to her. She's... Alara's throat went dry. She'll recover. Thank you for asking, sir. Broken leg. It wasn't a question. Dominic Vale reached the bottom of the staircase and stopped, maintaining a careful distance. Professional, unthreatening, which somehow made him more unsettling. Your first time in a household like this? Yes, sir. Then I'll make this simple. He adjusted his cufflinks with precise fingers. I pay extremely well for 3 things: competence, loyalty, and silence. Provide those, and you'll find this a comfortable position. Fail at any of them, and you'll be escorted out within the hour. Mrs. Chen doesn't tolerate mediocrity, and neither do I. I understand. Do you? Those gray eyes fixed on her face, and Alara felt stripped bare under that gaze, as if he could see every secret she'd ever kept. This household operates on trust. Broken trust has consequences. The implied threat hung in the air like smoke. Mrs. Chen cleared her throat. Mr. Vale, if you'll excuse us, I need to complete the orientation before... Of course. But he didn't move immediately. Instead, his eyes remained on Alara for another long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Then he turned and walked toward what Mrs. Chen had identified as his study. Welcome to my home, Miss Voss. I hope you'll find it suits you. The door closed behind him with a quiet click. Alara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You did well, Mrs. Chen said quietly. He makes most new staff nervous. Come. There's still much to show you before morning. Tick. The first week passed in a blur of routine and careful invisibility. Alara woke at 5 each morning, took 2 buses to reach the estate by 6, and spent the next 12 hours making herself useful and unnoticed. She learned which rooms Dominic preferred for morning coffee. The sunroom facing east, always black, no sugar. She discovered his habit of working late into the night, the study windows glowing until 3 or 4 in the morning. She memorized the patterns of his visitors, men in expensive suits who spoke in low voices, their conversations ending the moment she entered to refresh drinks or clear dishes. She became exactly what she needed to be, invisible. It was a skill she'd honed to perfection over the years. In her father's house, though calling Martin Voss father felt like a betrayal of the word itself. Invisibility meant survival. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make eye contact during his rages. Don't exist loudly enough to draw attention. Here in Dominic Vale's house, the stakes were different, but the strategy remained the same. Keep your head down, do your work, don't be seen. But Dominic Vale saw everything. She noticed it in small moments, the way his eyes would track her movements across a room, even while he was deep in conversation. How he would pause mid-sentence if she stumbled or made the slightest sound of discomfort. The strange contradiction of a man who commanded fear, yet seemed hyper-aware of everyone around him. It was unsettling. It was also, Alara had to admit in her most honest moments, fascinating. On her 8th day, everything changed. She was in the library, a room of floor-to-ceiling mahogany shelves filled with leather-bound books that actually looked red, not just decorative. Her job was simple: dust the shelves, water the plants, replace any wilted flowers. She'd reached for a vase on a high shelf when pain lanced through her forearm. The vase didn't fall. Her training was too ingrained for that, but her sharp intake of breath was audible in the quiet room. Careful. Alara spun around, heart hammering. Dominic stood in the doorway, still dressed for whatever business had kept him away all morning. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, his tie slightly loosened, the most casual she'd ever seen him. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't realize you were... The vase is 17th century Venetian glass. He crossed the room with those measured steps. Priceless, irreplaceable, and completely unimportant compared to the fact that you're hurt. I'm not hurt, I just... Show me your arm. It wasn't a request. Alara's pulse spiked. Really, it's nothing. I just moved too quickly and... Miss Voss. His voice remained calm, but something harder entered it. Not anger, something else. Show me your arm, please. The please undid her. With shaking fingers, Alara pushed up her sleeve. The bruise was fresh, maybe 2 days old, a dark purple bloom against pale skin. Not from today. From 2 nights ago, when she'd made the mistake of coming home after her stepfather had been drinking. Dominic's expression didn't change. Not a flicker of surprise, no dramatic reaction. He simply looked at the bruise with the same intense focus he brought to everything, then met her eyes. "How long?" he asked quietly. "I don't know what you don't." The word was soft but absolute. I've seen enough violence in my life to recognize its signature. "How long has this been happening?" Alara's throat constricted. "It's not your concern, Mr. Vale. That's not what I asked." "With respect, sir, my personal life stops being personal the moment it affects someone under my roof." He stepped closer, and Alara's instinct was to retreat, but something in his eyes held her in place. Not threat, something that looked almost like concern? "I employ 43 people across my various businesses. Each one represents a responsibility. I don't take that lightly. I'm just temporary help. My mother will be back in a few weeks. Your mother has been coming to work with hidden bruises for 2 years. The words fell like stones in still water. "I noticed. I didn't intervene because she was careful, professional, and because I've learned that some people aren't ready to be helped. But you—" His eyes dropped to her arm again. "You're different." "I'm not." "You are." He said it with such certainty that Alara almost believed it. "Your mother has accepted her situation, rationalized it, found ways to survive it. But you? You're still fighting. I can see it in your eyes." Alara felt something crack open in her chest. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough." Dominic pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. "Who is he? Husband? Boyfriend?" "My stepfather." "Name?" "Mr. Vale, please." "Alara." Her name in his mouth was strange, intimate. He'd never used it before. "I'm going to help you whether you cooperate or not. The only question is whether you make it difficult." "Why?" The word burst out before she could stop it. "Why would you care? You don't know me. I'm nobody, just another maid in your house." Something flickered across his face, an old pain, perhaps, or recognition. "My mother was a maid," he said quietly. "She worked in a house not unlike this one, for people who treated her like furniture. Useful when needed, invisible otherwise. When my father, a married man, the son of the family who employed her, got her pregnant, they fired her, gave her $5,000, and told her to disappear." Alara's breath caught. "She raised me alone. We lived in a one-room apartment above a butcher shop. She worked 3 jobs to keep me fed, clothed, educated. And when I was 14, the man who owned the building where we lived, a man who thought her vulnerability gave him rights, put her in the hospital." The air in the library felt suddenly thin. "I couldn't help her then," Dominic continued, his voice still calm but carrying an edge sharp enough to cut. "I was a boy with no power, no resources, no options. I held her hand in that hospital room and promised myself that would never happen again. To her, to anyone I could prevent it from happening to." "What did you do?" Alara whispered. "I became powerful. Simple, direct, honest. I built an empire that makes men like him afraid, and now when I see someone being hurt by someone who thinks they're untouchable," his eyes locked on hers, "I make them realize how wrong they are. I don't want violence. I just want your mother safe, yourself safe, a normal life." Dominic's mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "I understand, but sometimes, Miss Voss, peace requires a demonstration of power, not cruelty, not revenge, just clarity, making it very clear what the consequences of continued behavior will be." Alara's mind raced. "I don't want you to kill him." "I wasn't planning to." He said it so matter-of-factly that Alara almost laughed. "Death is permanent and messy and draws attention from authorities I prefer to keep at a comfortable distance. But there are many other ways to ensure someone never hurts anyone again." "This is insane." "Perhaps." Dominic pocketed his phone. "But it's happening regardless. Now, I need a name and an address, and information about where your mother is currently staying." "The hospital, room 347 at Mercy General." "And your stepfather?" Alara closed her eyes. "Martin Voss, 1847 Ashland Street. Good. Dominic pulled out his phone again, made a quick call. James, I need you to arrange transport from Mercy General. Patient in room 347, Clara Voss. Bring her to the north property, the cottage by the lake. Make sure she has everything she needs. Medical care, personal items from her home, anything else. He paused. No, she won't come willingly. Tell her Dominic Vale insists, and her daughter is safe. That should be sufficient. He ended the call and turned back to Alara. Your mother will be comfortable and protected. You'll stay here in one of the staff quarters until what? Alara demanded. Until you've done whatever violent thing you're planning? Until my stepfather is beaten or threatened, or until he understands that touching either of you again means consequences he cannot survive. Dominic's voice remained level. I'm not a good man, Miss Voss. I've done things that would horrify you, but I have rules, lines I don't cross. Hurting women and children is one of them. And you enforce those rules how? Effectively. The single word carried the weight of years, of choices made in shadows, of a life built on foundations Alara couldn't begin to understand. She should be terrified. She should run from this room, from this house, from this dangerous man who spoke of violence with the casual efficiency of someone discussing a business transaction. Instead, she found herself asking, "What do you need from me?" Dominic's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Stay here tonight. Tomorrow, this will be handled. After that, you and your mother can decide what comes next. And if I refuse, if I just walk out right now, then I'll respect your choice and handle this anyway. He met her eyes. Because knowing what I know, I can't unknow it. And I can't let it continue. That's not a threat to you, it's simply who I am. Alara believed him. God help her, she believed every word. Autumn. That night, Alara lay in an elegant guest room that was larger than the apartment she'd grown up in, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of what had happened. Dominic Vale, feared crime boss, man of violence and power, had seen her bruises and decided to intervene. Not because she'd asked, not because he wanted something from her, but because some code buried deep in his dangerous heart said it was the right thing to do. It made no sense. Men like him didn't care about people like her. Men with power used it for themselves, not for broken girls and their mothers trapped in cycles of abuse. And yet, a soft knock on her door made her sit up. Yes? Mrs. Chen entered, carrying a tray. I thought you might not have eaten. It's late, but the kitchen always has food available. Thank you. Alara accepted the tray. Soup, bread, fruit. Simple, but elegant. Mrs. Chen, can I ask you something? You can ask. The older woman's expression remained neutral. I may not answer. How long have you worked for Mr. Vale? 12 years. And in that time, has he ever done anything like this before? Mrs. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then, Mr. Vale employs over 40 people. Not one of them lives in fear. Not one of them goes home to violence. He makes that very clear in his hiring process. If you're running from something, if you need protection, if you have a problem that requires his particular brand of solution, you come to him. He handles it. Just like that? Just like that. Mrs. Chen's eyes held something that might have been respect. 3 years ago, one of the groundskeepers had an ex-husband who wouldn't accept the divorce, kept showing up, making threats, scaring her children. Mr. Vale had a conversation with the man. Just a conversation. The ex-husband moved to another state within a week and hasn't been heard from since. What did he say to him? I don't know, neither does she. But whatever it was, it worked. Mrs. Chen moved toward the door. Mr. Vale isn't a good man by conventional standards, but he has rules. Honor in his own way. Sleep well, Miss Voss. Tomorrow will bring change. She left Alara alone with her thoughts and her soup and the growing realization that she'd stepped into a world she didn't understand. Morning came with pale light and the sound of rain still falling. Alara dressed carefully, choosing long sleeves despite the room's warmth. Old habits died hard. She found Dominic in the sunroom exactly as expected. Black coffee, newspaper, the morning ritual of a man whose life was built on precision and control. Sit, he said without looking up. Have you eaten? Mrs. Chen brought me dinner last night. That's not what I asked. Alara sat. A moment later, one of the other staff members appeared with a full breakfast, eggs, toast, fruit, orange juice. Too much food for one person, but Alara found herself hungry in a way she hadn't been in days. Dominic waited until she had taken several bites before speaking. Your mother is settled at the lake cottage. She was resistant at first, but my people can be very persuasive. She's being seen by a private physician this morning. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He finally looked up from his paper. I'm going to see your stepfather this morning. You can come if you want. Or you can stay here. Either way, what needs to happen will happen. Alara set down her fork. I should be there. Why? Because I need to see his face when he realizes someone finally stood up to him. The words came out harder than she intended. I need to see him understand that he's not untouchable, that someone finally saw what he was doing and decided to stop it. Dominic studied her for a long moment. You're sure? I'm sure. Then finish your breakfast. We leave in an hour. The house at 1847 Ashland Street was exactly as Alara remembered. A modest two-story structure badly in need of paint, the yard overgrown, the windows covered with cheap curtains. She'd lived here for 7 years. It had never felt like home. Dominic's car pulled up to the curb, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows, and a driver who looked more like a bodyguard than a chauffeur, because he probably was. Last chance to change your mind, Dominic said. Alara shook her head. They walked to the front door together. Dominic knocked once, sharp and authoritative. Martin Voss opened the door with the bleary-eyed confusion of someone who'd been drinking since last night. He was a big man, thick through the shoulders and stomach, with hands like hammers and a face that turned mean when he drank, which was almost always. His eyes went to Alara first, narrowing with recognition and irritation. What the hell are you doing here? Where's your... Then he saw Dominic. Whatever Martin had been about to say died in his throat. Mr. Voss. Dominic's voice was pleasant, conversational. May we come in? I think we have some things to discuss. Martin's face had gone pale. Who are you? Dominic Vale. I believe you've heard of me. The color drained completely from Martin's face. I don't want any trouble. I don't have anything to do with your business. I'm just You're a coward who beats women. Dominic's tone didn't change. And we're going to discuss why that's going to stop. Now, we can have this conversation out here where your neighbors can watch, or we can have it inside. Your choice. You have 5 seconds. Martin stumbled backward, pulling the door open. The house smelled like stale beer and unwashed dishes. Alara hadn't been inside in 3 days, not since the night that left the bruise on her arm. It looked worse than she remembered. Sit, Dominic instructed Martin, gesturing to the worn couch. Martin sat. Dominic remained standing, and something about his posture, relaxed but ready, casual but dangerous, filled the room with tension. Here's what's going to happen, Dominic said calmly. Clara Voss and her daughter are no longer your concern. They're under my protection now. If you attempt to contact them, threaten them, or come within 100 yards of either of them, there will be consequences. You can't just... I can. 2 words, absolute certainty. You're going to sell this house. The market value is approximately $180,000. You'll accept an offer of $150,000 from a buyer I'll provide. That money will go into an account I control. Half will be held in trust for Clara's medical expenses and living costs. The other half will be yours, provided you leave this city within 1 week and never return. Martin's face flushed red. Like hell I will. This is my house. They're my family. You can't force me to... Dominic pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and turned it to face Martin. Alara couldn't see what was displayed, but she watched her stepfather's face go from red to gray in seconds. That's you, 2 weeks ago, outside the Riverside bar, Dominic said conversationally. You got in your truck, drove home, with a blood alcohol level 3 times the legal limit. Hit a mailbox on Cedar Street. Didn't stop. That's a felony hit and run, Mr. Voss. I have 3 more incidents just like it documented here. He swiped to another image. This is you, last month, buying OxyContin from a dealer named Marcus Chen. Street value, $500. That's felony drug possession. Shall I continue? Martin's hands were shaking. You set me up. No, you did these things. I simply made sure they were documented. Dominic pocketed his phone. I have enough evidence here to put you in prison for 5 to 7 years. That's if the prosecutor is feeling generous. If they're not, and if certain details about your treatment of your wife and stepdaughter come to light during trial, we're looking at a decade, maybe more. I never touched. Don't. Dominic's voice went cold. Don't insult my intelligence or waste my time. I've seen the medical records, the hospital visits, the carefully worded reports from doctors who suspected but couldn't prove. I could bury you with this information. Silence filled the room like poison. Or, Dominic continued, his tone warming slightly, you take my offer. Sell the house, take your money, leave town. Start over somewhere else, stay away from your family and make better choices. In exchange, these files disappear. You get a second chance at a life that doesn't end in a prison cell. Martin's jaw worked soundlessly. And if I refuse? Then tomorrow morning, these files land on the desk of District Attorney Sarah Chen, who happens to be very motivated to prosecute domestic violence cases since her sister died in a situation remarkably similar to yours. You'll be arrested by end of business day. And Mr. Voss? Dominic leaned forward slightly. I have significant influence in the prison system. If you go to jail, I can make sure every single inmate knows exactly what you did to the women in your family. I think you understand what that means. Alara watched her stepfather's face crumble. All the violence, all the rage, all the power he'd wielded over her and her mother for years. Gone. Erased by a man who'd simply decided it was time for things to change. 1 week, Martin whispered. 6 days now, Dominic corrected. The offer expires at midnight Friday. After that, the only thing waiting for you is a cell and a very long sentence. He straightened, buttoned his suit jacket. Miss Voss, are there any belongings you need to collect? Alara looked around the house that had been her prison for 7 years. No, nothing here is mine. Then we're done here. They walked back to the car together. Alara didn't look back. In the car, silence stretched between them for several blocks before Alara found her voice. How long were you planning that? I had suspicions about your mother's situation for about 18 months, Dominic admitted. When you showed up with fresh bruises, I had my people start gathering evidence immediately. They work fast. You had him investigated in less than 24 hours? I have resources. He glanced at her. Are you angry? Alara searched for the right word. I'm overwhelmed. You barely know me. My mother's just an employee. Why would you go to this much trouble? Because I could. Simple. Direct. Because you needed help and I had the power to provide it. Because letting it continue when I could stop it would make me complicit. He paused. And because I meant what I said yesterday. My mother suffered because I was powerless to help her. Now I'm not powerless, so I help when I can. That's not normal, Alara said quietly. No, Dominic agreed. It's not. But neither is my life, neither is my business. I stopped aspiring to normal a long time ago. They drove in silence for a while, rain pattering against the windows. What happens now? Alara asked finally. Now you and your mother decide what comes next. The cottage is yours as long as you need it. Your mother's medical care is covered. You can keep working here if you choose, or find something else. The choice is yours. Just like that? Just like that. He looked at her again, those storm-gray eyes seeing too much. You're not prisoners, Miss Voss. You're not obligated to me. Consider this a gift with no strings attached. Alara knew she should feel relieved, grateful, safe. Instead, she felt something else entirely. Something that whispered this was the beginning of something, not the end. And as Dominic Vale's car carried her away from the only prison she'd ever known, Alara realized that for the first time in her life, she was genuinely curious about what came next. The lake cottage sat at the edge of Dominic's northern property, hidden behind a screen of willows and wild roses. It was small compared to the main estate, just 3 bedrooms, a kitchen that opened to a living room with windows overlooking the water, and a wraparound porch that caught the morning sun. But to Alara, walking through the door with her mother for the first time, it felt like something out of a dream. Clara Voss stood in the center of the living room, leaning heavily on her crutches, staring at the space with an expression Alara couldn't quite read. Her mother had always been good at hiding emotions. Survival skill, same as invisibility. But now, in the soft afternoon light filtering through gauze curtains, Clara looked smaller than Alara remembered. Fragile. "This is too much," Clara said quietly. "Sweetheart, we can't accept this." "It's already done, Mom." Alara set down the bag of her mother's belongings that Dominic's people had collected from the house. Personal items, clothes, photographs, everything that mattered, nothing that didn't. Mr. Vale was very clear. This is ours as long as we need it. But why? Clara turned to face her daughter, and Alara saw tears in her eyes. Why would a man like him care about people like us? Because he saw me, Alara thought. Because he looked at my bruises and decided they mattered. Out loud, she said, because he could help, and he chose to. Clara lowered herself carefully onto the cream-colored sofa. Expensive fabric, comfortable cushions. Nothing like the sagging furniture they'd left behind. Nothing's free, Alara. Men like Dominic Vale don't give without expecting something in return. He said no strings attached. And you believe him? Alara thought about the drive back from Ashland Street, the way Dominic had spoken about his mother, about power and protection, about the choice to help when you had the ability. She thought about Martin's face when he'd realized he was beaten, not with fists, with evidence, with leverage, with the cold precision of someone who understood exactly how the world worked. Yes, she said finally. I believe him. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took Alara's hand. You're stronger than I ever was, you know that? Braver. I should have left him years ago. Should have protected you better. Instead, I just survived, and I let him hurt you. Mom, no, let me say this. Clara's grip tightened. I was so afraid of being alone, of not being able to support us, of him finding us if we ran. I told myself it was better to stay, to endure, to keep our heads down. But all I did was teach you that this was normal, that we deserved it. Alara felt something crack in her chest. We're out now. That's what matters. Because of him, because Dominic Vale saw what I was too afraid to escape from and decided to end it. Clara's voice broke. I don't know whether to be grateful or terrified. Both, Alara admitted. I'm both. A soft knock on the door interrupted them. Alara opened it to find Mrs. Chen standing on the porch, carrying another bag. Groceries, the older woman explained, moving past Alara into the kitchen with practiced efficiency. Mr. Vale wanted to make sure you were properly stocked. There's also a phone number on the refrigerator, direct line to the house. If you need anything, call. Someone will answer. Clara struggled to her feet. Mrs. Chen, please thank Mr. Vale for us. This is incredibly generous, but we don't want to impose. You're not imposing. Mrs. Chen's tone was matter-of-fact as she unpacked fresh bread, milk, eggs, vegetables. Mr. Vale takes care of his people. That includes you now. But I'm just his employee, yes. And this is how he treats employees who need help. She paused, turning to face Clara. I know this is overwhelming. I know men like Mr. Vale seem dangerous, unpredictable, but I've worked for him for 12 years, and I've never seen him hurt someone who didn't deserve it. He has rules, honor. You're safe here. After Mrs. Chen left, Clara moved to the kitchen and stared at the refrigerator. The phone number was written in neat script on a card held by a magnet. Below it, another note. The doctor will visit tomorrow at 10 a.m. If you need the appointment changed, call. He even arranged medical care, Clara whispered. Alara didn't respond. She was looking out the window at the lake, watching sunlight dance on water, and thinking about the strange turn her life had taken in just 48 hours. From invisible to seen, from trapped to free, from powerless to protected by the most powerful man in the city. It should have felt like a fairy tale. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of something vast and unknown, with no map to guide her forward. 3 days later, Alara returned to work at the main estate. She'd spent the time helping her mother settle in, organizing the cottage, avoiding the questions that circled in her mind like sharks. But eventually, routine called. Her mother was healing, comfortable, safe, and Alara needed something to occupy her hands and mind. The estate felt different now. Or maybe she was the one who'd changed. She moved through her duties with the same quiet efficiency, dusting, cleaning, arranging fresh flowers in the rooms Dominic preferred. But she found herself more aware of him. The sound of his voice drifting from the study during phone calls. The way he took his coffee. The books he left open on the library table, pages marked with careful precision. She noticed things she'd trained herself not to see before, like the medical textbooks mixed in with the business volumes. Gray's Anatomy, Principles of Surgery, Clinical Diagnosis and Management, books that looked worn from use, not just display. Curious? Alara jumped, nearly dropping the vase she'd been repositioning. Dominic stood in the library doorway, dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him. Dark jeans, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. It was evening, past the time when business associates visited. Just him and the quiet house. "I'm sorry," Alara said automatically. "I didn't mean to." "You have nothing to apologize for." He moved into the room, glancing at the books she'd been studying. "Most people assume they're just decoration, something to make me look more educated than I am." "Are they?" "No." He picked up the copy of Gray's Anatomy, handling it with the care of someone who valued what it represented. "I was in medical school when my mother got sick. Second year, top of my class. I was going to be a surgeon." Alara's surprise must have shown on her face because his mouth curved slightly. Hard to imagine now, isn't it? Dominic Vale, the crime boss, once aspired to save lives instead of ruining them. "What happened?" He set the book down carefully. "My mother developed cancer, ovarian, stage 4 by the time they caught it. The treatment was expensive, far more than I could afford on student loans and part-time work. I tried everything legal, scholarships, payment plans, charity care. Nothing was enough." The room felt very quiet. "So I did something illegal," Dominic continued, his voice steady. "Small at first, selling study drugs to stressed students, then bigger things, whatever paid well enough to cover her medical bills. By the time she died 6 months later, I dropped out of school and built a network that was too profitable to abandon." "I'm sorry," Alara said softly. "Don't be. I made choices. I live with them." He looked at her with those gray eyes that saw too much. "But sometimes I wonder what kind of man I would have become if I'd finished, if I'd walked the path I'd planned instead of the one necessity forced me onto." "You could go back." "Could I?" The question seemed genuine. "I'm 34 years old. I run an empire built on fear and force. I've done things that would make medical ethics boards recoil in horror. What hospital would accept me? What licensing board would approve my application? One that values skill over history," Alara said. "If you're as good as you say you were." Something flickered in his expression, surprise maybe, or interest. "You think it's that simple?" "I think nothing about you is simple, Mr. Vale." The words came out braver than she felt. "But I also think you're someone who does what he decides to do. If you wanted to go back to medicine, you'd find a way." He studied her for a long moment. "You're very direct for someone who spent the last week trying to be invisible." "Maybe I'm tired of being invisible." The air between them shifted, charged with something Alara couldn't name. "How's your mother?" Dominic asked, changing the subject with the smooth ease of someone used to controlling conversations. "Better. The doctor you sent was very thorough. She's healing well." "Good. And you? How are you adjusting?" "To what? Freedom? Safety? Not being afraid every time I walk through a door?" Alara's voice carried an edge she didn't try to hide. "It's strange. I keep waiting for something bad to happen, for this to be temporary, for you to ask for payment of some kind. I won't. Everyone wants something." "Yes," Dominic agreed. "I want to know you're safe. I want your mother to heal. I want the man who hurt you both to never hurt anyone again. Those are the things I want, and I already have them." "Just like that." "Just like that." Alara shook her head slowly. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "A monster, someone cruel and cold who used power like a weapon." She met his eyes. "But you use it like a shield, to protect people who can't protect themselves." "Don't romanticize what I do, Miss Voss." His voice went harder. "I've hurt people, destroyed lives, built an empire on violence and fear. The fact that I choose to protect my own doesn't make me noble. It makes me selective." "Maybe, but selective mercy is still mercy." He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression, Then he turned toward the door. It's late. You should go home. The driver will take you to the cottage. I can take the bus. The driver will take you, he repeated, not unkindly. No one under my protection takes public transportation at night when I have vehicles available. It's not safe. Mr. Vale. Dominic. He paused in the doorway. When it's just us, call me Dominic. The formality is exhausting. And then he was gone, leaving Alara alone in the library with medical textbooks and the lingering scent of his cologne, and 1,000 questions she didn't know how to ask. The pattern established itself over the following weeks. Alara worked at the estate during the day, maintaining the invisible efficiency that Dominic valued. But the invisibility felt different now. Not hiding, just professional distance. She could feel his awareness of her, even when he was buried in work or dealing with the dangerous men who visited his study for hushed conversations. Sometimes, in the evenings after his business associates left, they would talk. It started accidentally. Alara had been in the library, returning books to their proper shelves, when Dominic appeared with a glass of whiskey and a question about what she was reading, a nursing textbook. She'd been studying during slow moments, preparing for the certification exam she'd put off for 2 years while dealing with Martin's chaos. You're in school? He'd asked. Was. I had to stop when... She didn't finish, didn't need to. You should go back. Can't afford it. Yes, you can. He'd said it with such certainty that she'd looked up from her book. You work for me. I provide education benefits for staff who want to advance themselves. It's in the employee handbook Mrs. Chen gave you. She'd never read the handbook. That's for full-time employees. I'm just temporary until my mother typer. You're full-time now. As of last week, Mrs. Chen reclassified your position. He'd sipped his whiskey. The benefits include tuition reimbursement for approved programs. Nursing qualifies. Apply for readmission. When you're accepted, submit the paperwork to Mrs. Chen. Why would you do that? Because you want to be a nurse. Because you're clearly intelligent enough to succeed. Because wasting potential bothers me. He'd met her eyes. And because I can. After that, the conversations became routine. Not every night, but often enough that Alara found herself looking forward to them. They'd talk about books, about her studies, about the strange contradictions of his life. He never spoke directly about his business, but sometimes he'd share stories from before. His childhood, his mother, the medical school dreams he'd abandoned. In return, she told him about growing up with Martin's violence, about protecting her mother, about the small rebellions of maintaining hope in a hopeless situation. You're stronger than you think, he'd said one night, 3 weeks into their new routine. I'm not strong. I just survived. Survival requires strength, especially when the easier path would be to break. He'd been reading one of his medical texts, but he set it aside to look at her fully. Most people in your situation would have internalized the abuse, believed they deserved it, lost themselves entirely. But you didn't. You kept studying, kept planning for a future, kept believing there was something better waiting. I had to, for my mom. No, you did it for yourself too, and that's not weakness, it's the opposite. The words had settled into her chest like warmth. She was beginning to understand that Dominic Vale, feared criminal, powerful boss, dangerous man, was also profoundly lonely. Isolated by the life he'd built, surrounded by people who feared or wanted something from him, never able to let his guard down. Except somehow, with her. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like recognition. Two people who'd learned to hide themselves, slowly learning to be seen. The shift came on a Thursday night, 5 weeks after Alara had first walked into Dominic's estate. She'd been in the library late, later than usual. Her certification exam was scheduled for the following week, and anxiety had her reviewing material she'd already mastered. Dominic found her there at nearly 11, surrounded by flashcards and half-empty coffee cups. You need to sleep, he said from the doorway. I need to pass this exam. You will. You know this material better than most practicing nurses. He crossed to where she sat, glancing at her notes. What's really bothering you? Alara looked up at him. He'd loosened his tie, unbuttoned his collar, evidence of a long day dealing with whatever violence and business kept him occupied, but his eyes were focused entirely on her. I'm afraid, she admitted. Of the exam? Of all of it. Of passing and becoming someone new. Of what happens when my mom is fully healed and we don't need your protection anymore. Of whether any of this is real or just some strange dream I'll wake up from. Dominic pulled out the chair across from her and sat, a gesture of equality that still surprised her. What do you think happens when your mother heals? I don't know. We leave? Find our own place? Stop being your responsibility? You were never my responsibility. You were my choice. He leaned forward slightly. Alara, you and your mother can stay at the cottage as long as you want. A year, 5 years, forever. There's no expiration date on safety. That's not normal. I'm aware. His mouth curved slightly. But then, nothing about this situation is normal. A crime boss who wanted to be a doctor, a woman who survived hell and came out planning for a future. Two people who probably shouldn't trust each other but somehow do. I do trust you, Alara said quietly. That's what scares me. I've spent my whole life learning that trusting powerful men leads to pain, but you're different, and I don't know what to do with that. Dominic was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. I'm not a good man, Alara. I've done terrible things, hurt people, built an empire on fear. The protection I offer you comes from that same capacity for violence. I need you to understand that. I do understand. Do you? Because there's a difference between knowing intellectually that I'm dangerous and truly comprehending what that means. The lives I've ruined, the families I've destroyed, the blood on my hands, literal and metaphorical. Why are you telling me this? He met her eyes. Because you're starting to see me as something I'm not, as some kind of hero who rescued you. But heroes don't exist in my world, only people making choices with the tools they have. And my tools are violence and power. You use them to protect people. Sometimes, when it serves my interests, but I also use them to eliminate rivals, to control territories, to build wealth through illegal means. I'm not selective about that violence, Alara. I'm just selective about who I choose to shield from it. The library felt very quiet. I know what you are, Alara said finally. I'm not naive enough to think you're a good man by conventional standards, but I also know what you've done for me and my mother, how you've treated us. The way you talk about your past, your regrets, the dreams you abandoned. You're more complicated than just villain or hero. You're human, flawed and powerful and capable of both cruelty and kindness. And that doesn't frighten you? It terrifies me, but not in the way you think. She closed her textbook, meeting his gaze steadily. I'm not afraid you'll hurt me. I'm afraid I'm starting to care about you. And I don't know what to do with that either. The words hung in the air between them like a confession. Dominic's expression shifted, something raw and unguarded flickering across his face before he locked it down again. Alara, I know it's complicated. I know it's probably stupid, but I need to be honest. Her heart hammered in her chest. Every day I come here, I tell myself it's just work, just gratitude, just safety. But it's more than that now. These conversations we have, the way you look at me like I matter, like I'm more than just another person you're protecting, it's changing how I see you, how I see everything. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you read medical textbooks at night because you still dream about the life you lost. I know you built an empire because you were desperate to save your mother and couldn't walk away after she died. I know you protect your people with the same fierce loyalty that makes you dangerous to your enemies. I know you're profoundly lonely despite being surrounded by people all the time. Dominic stood abruptly, turning toward the window. His shoulders were tense, his hands clenched at his sides. You can't care about me, Alara. It's not safe. Not for you. Too late. He turned back to face her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Vulnerability, fear, want. Do you know what would happen if my enemies knew you mattered to me? His voice was rough. They'd use you, hurt you to get to me. You'd become a target. I'm already a target by living under your protection. No, you're an employee, protected by principle, not emotion. There's a difference. And if I want to be more than an employee? The question fell between them like a stone in still water. Dominic closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, they were filled with something that looked like pain. I spent 15 years building walls around myself, learning not to care too much about anyone because caring creates weakness, vulnerability. And in my world, vulnerability gets you killed. Maybe, Alara said softly, Or maybe it makes you human. I can't afford to be human. Can't or won't? He stared at her for a long moment. Then, moving slowly, giving her every opportunity to retreat, he crossed the space between them. He didn't touch her, just stood close enough that she could feel the heat of him, see the conflict written across his features. If we do this, he said quietly, if we acknowledge what's happening here, there's no going back. You'll be tied to me, to my world, to everything dark and dangerous that comes with it. I'm already tied to you. You saved my life, my mother's life. That's gratitude. This is different. Yes, Alara agreed, her voice steady despite her racing heart. This is choice. I'm choosing to see you. All of you. Not just the powerful boss or the dangerous criminal, the man who wanted to be a doctor, who reads medical texts like prayers, who protects people because he couldn't protect the one person who mattered most. Dominic's hand lifted slowly, hesitantly, until his fingers brushed her cheek. The touch was gentle, almost reverent, nothing like the violence she knew he was capable of. You should run from me, he whispered. Probably. You should find someone safe, normal, someone who doesn't have blood on his hands and enemies circling like sharks. I don't want safe. The truth of it surprised her even as she said it. I've spent my whole life trying to be safe, invisible, hidden. I'm tired of it. I want to be seen. And you see me, Dominic. You've seen me from the first moment. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, and Alara felt herself leaning into the touch. This is a terrible idea. Most worthwhile things are. He smiled then, a real smile, not the practiced ones he wore for business associates. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. You're going to ruin me, he said. Good. You could use some ruin. And then he was kissing her, soft and careful, and nothing like she'd expected. Not demanding or possessive, just honest, a question more than a claim. Alara kissed him back, tasting whiskey and something darker, feeling the carefully controlled power in the way he held her, gentle despite his strength, reverent despite his capacity for violence. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing harder, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. How to care about someone without destroying them. Then we'll figure it out together. It won't be easy. My life, I know, dangerous, complicated, built on things that would horrify most people. Alara pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. But I'm not most people. I've survived my own kind of hell. I'm not afraid of yours. You should be. Maybe. But I'm not. She took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I'm just asking you to let me see all of who you are. Not just the boss, not just the protector. The man who reads medical books like he's praying for redemption, that's who I want to know. Dominic looked at their joined hands, then back at her face. If we do this, if we try this, I need you to understand something. I won't change who I am. What I do. The empire I've built isn't going anywhere. I'm not asking you to. But I also won't let you be hurt because of me, which means security, protection, rules you won't like. We can negotiate the rules. His mouth curved. Negotiate. With me. That's brave. Or stupid. Both, probably. He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her with surprising tenderness. You're going to complicate everything, aren't you? That's the plan. They stood there in the library surrounded by books and the weight of choices made, holding each other like they'd found something unexpected and precious. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft against the windows. Inside, something new took root between two people who'd never expected to find each other. Dangerous. Complicated. Built on foundations most people would never understand. But real. Honest. Chosen. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Alara felt something that had nothing to do with fear or survival or invisible endurance. She felt alive. The shift in their relationship changed everything and nothing all at once. Alara still came to work each morning, still moved through the estate with practiced efficiency. But now, when Dominic passed her in the hallway, his fingers would brush hers, just for a moment, barely perceptible to anyone watching. When she brought him coffee in the study, he'd look up from his paperwork with something warm in his eyes that made her heart skip. Small gestures, private moments stolen between the demands of his dangerous world. Mrs. Chen noticed, of course. The woman saw everything. "Be careful," she said to Alara one afternoon, her tone neutral but her meaning clear. "Mr. Vale is complicated. His life doesn't leave room for normal relationships." "I know what I'm doing," Alara replied, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. "Do you?" Mrs. Chen paused in her inventory of the linen closet. "He's a good man in his own way, better than most in his position, but the people who care about him become targets, leverage, weaknesses his enemies will exploit. He told me the same thing." "And yet you're still here." Alara met the older woman's eyes. "I'm still here." Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then you're braver than I thought, or more foolish. Time will tell which." That conversation haunted Alara as she went about her duties. She understood the risks. Dominic had been brutally honest about them, but understanding danger intellectually was different from truly comprehending what it meant. She'd survived one kind of violence in Martin's house. Could she survive the kind that came with loving a man like Dominic Vale? Loving. The word stopped her mid-step as she crossed the foyer with fresh flowers for the dining room. Was that what this was? Love? She barely knew him, really. 6 weeks of conversations and stolen glances and one kiss that had rewired something fundamental in her chest. That wasn't enough time to love someone, especially someone as complicated and dangerous as Dominic. Except it felt like love. Or the beginning of it. The way her pulse quickened when she heard his voice. How she found herself looking for excuses to be in rooms he occupied. The fierce protectiveness she felt when she overheard his business associates speaking about him with fear and calculation. "You look troubled." Alara turned to find Dominic standing at the base of the grand staircase, dressed for evening business in a black suit that made him look even more dangerous than usual, but his eyes were soft as they studied her face. "Just thinking," she said. "About?" "Complications." His mouth curved slightly. "My specialty." He glanced toward the study where voices indicated his visitors had already arrived. "I have a meeting. It'll run late, probably past midnight. You should go home after you finish here." "I could wait." "Alara." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "These men aren't like my usual business partners. They're from the Volkov organization, Russian, unpredictable. I don't want you anywhere near them." "Are you in danger?" "I'm always in danger. It's the nature of what I do." He touched her cheek briefly, the gesture achingly tender. "But I'm very good at managing it. Trust me." She did trust him. That was the problem. She trusted him completely, which meant the thought of him sitting down with dangerous men while she went home safe made her stomach twist. "Be careful," she whispered. "Always." He started toward the study, then paused. "Your exam is next week. Are you ready?" The fact that he remembered, despite everything else occupying his mind, made her chest ache. "I think so." "You'll do brilliantly, and when you pass, we'll celebrate. Properly." Then he was gone, disappearing into the study where men who dealt in violence and power waited to discuss things Alara couldn't imagine. She tried to focus on finishing her work, tried to ignore the murmur of voices behind the study door, the occasional burst of harsh laughter, the tension that seemed to permeate the air itself. But concentration proved impossible. She was arranging the flowers in the dining room, white roses, always white roses, when she heard raised voices. Not quite shouting, but close. The kind of controlled anger that was somehow more frightening than rage. Alara's hand stilled on the vase. Through the walls, she could make out Dominic's voice, calm, measured, absolutely unyielding. Then another voice, heavily accented, responding with something that sounded like a threat. She should leave. This wasn't her business. These were exactly the kind of dangerous situations Dominic had warned her to avoid. Instead, she found herself moving toward the study, drawn by an instinct she didn't fully understand. The door was closed, but not fully latched. Through the gap, she could see partial figures. Dominic sat behind his desk, utterly relaxed despite the 3 large men standing across from him. 2 looked like standard muscle, broad shoulders, cold eyes, hands that had clearly seen violence. But the third man was different. Older, gray-haired, wearing an expensive suit that couldn't quite hide the predator beneath. "You're making a mistake, Vale." The older man's accent was thick, but his English clear. "The Volkov family has been very patient with your territorial expansion, but patience has limits." "I'm aware." Dominic's voice was ice. "Which is why I'm offering you a very reasonable compromise. The docks remain neutral territory. We split the revenue 60-40. 60-40 in whose favor? Mine. I control the union. I have the relationships with the shipping companies. You want access? You pay for it." One of the muscle-bound men shifted forward slightly. "You think you're untouchable because you've built some empire? Because the police look the other way. We've been doing this since before you were born, boy." Dominic didn't even glance at the speaker. His eyes remained locked on the older man, the one who actually mattered. "Sergei, let's be honest. You're here because Moscow sent you to clean up the mess your nephew made when he tried to muscle in on my territory without permission. 3 of his men are dead. 2 are in prison. The rest scattered like roaches when the lights came on. You're not in a position to make threats. You're in a position to accept terms." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sergei's expression hardened. "You killed Dmitri's men? They came into my territory with guns. They shot at my people. They made their choice." Dominic leaned back in his chair, the picture of casual power. "I responded proportionally. Your family should be thanking me. I could have started a war. Instead, I eliminated the immediate problem and left room for negotiation. Negotiation implies both parties have leverage. You have plenty of leverage. Russian connections, international supply lines, experience I can't match. But I have this city. Every dock worker, every union boss, every corrupt official who matters. They answer to me. You want to operate here, you work with me. Not against me." Alara's heart hammered in her chest as she watched the standoff play out. This was the Dominic Vale his enemies saw. Not the man who read medical textbooks and spoke softly in libraries. This was power incarnate, ruthless and absolute. And somehow, impossibly, she found it fascinating rather than frightening. Sergei studied Dominic for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. "You remind me of myself at your age. Arrogant, brilliant, dangerous enough to back up the arrogance. I'll take that as a compliment." "It's not. Men like us rarely die peacefully in our beds." Sergei pulled out a chair and sat without being invited, a gesture of equality. 60-40 is insulting, but I respect the audacity of asking for it. 55-45. My favor. 52-48. Mine. 51-49. Dominic considered. Agreed. But any violations of territory, any attempts to undercut the arrangement and the deal voids immediately. Acceptable. Though I'll need guarantees you won't expand further into areas we consider ours. Define your areas. They talked for another 20 minutes, negotiating boundaries and terms with the precision of corporate lawyers and the underlying threat of men who settled disputes with bullets when words failed. Alara watched, transfixed, as Dominic navigated the conversation with absolute control, never giving too much, never backing down when it mattered, reading his opponent with surgical precision. This was why he'd survived, why he'd built an empire while others fell. Not just because he was ruthless, but because he was smart, strategic, willing to compromise when necessary, but utterly immovable on core issues. She should have been horrified. Instead, she was reluctantly impressed. The meeting finally concluded with a handshake. Surprisingly civilized given the implied violence underlying every word. Sergei and his men left through the front entrance, their expensive car pulling away into the night. Alara started to retreat from her position by the study door, but Dominic's voice stopped her. "I know you're there, Alara." She froze. "You can come in. They're gone." Heart pounding, she pushed open the door fully and stepped inside. Dominic stood by the window, watching the taillights disappear down the long driveway. "I told you to go home," he said without turning. "I know. I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure I was safe." Now he turned, and his expression was unreadable. "That was dangerous. If they'd seen you, if they'd realized you mattered to me, it would have changed the entire dynamic of that negotiation. I stayed out of sight. This time." He crossed to his desk, poured himself a whiskey from the crystal decanter. "They're not like the other people you've seen here. These are men who use violence as a first resort, not a last one. Men who wouldn't hesitate to hurt someone I cared about if they thought it would give them an advantage. You handled them perfectly. I handled them this time. But there will be others, always others. He downed the whiskey in one swallow. This is my world, Alara. Negotiations backed by threats. Deals made with men who see human life as a commodity to be traded. You saw a fraction of it tonight, and you're already making excuses for staying when I explicitly told you to leave. I was worried about you. Don't be. I've been managing men like Sergei Volkov since I was 23 years old. I don't need protection. The words stung more than they should have. I wasn't trying to protect you. I needed to know you were okay. His expression softened marginally. And now you know, so go home. Rest. Take your exam next week. Build the life you're planning. What about you? What about me? When do you get to build the life you want? When do you get to be more than this? She gestured at the study, at the expensive trappings of his empire. You told me you wanted to be a doctor, that you still read those books like prayers. When do you get to have that? I made my choices, Alara. Choices can be unmade. He set down the glass with careful precision. It's not that simple. Why not? You're Dominic Vale. You do what you want. Everyone says so. Everyone's wrong. His voice carried an edge of bitterness. I do what's necessary to maintain the empire I've built, to protect the people who depend on me, to honor the commitments I've made. I don't have the luxury of walking away because I'm tired or because I want something different. But if you did, hypothetically, what would you want? The question hung in the air between them. Dominic looked at her for a long moment. Then, surprising her completely, he answered with devastating honesty. I'd finish medical school, get my license, open a practice in a neighborhood that needed one, somewhere poor where people couldn't afford proper health care. I'd spend my days actually helping people instead of managing an empire built on fear. That's specific. I've had 15 years to think about it. He moved to where she stood, close enough that she could smell whiskey and his cologne. But it's a fantasy, Alara, nothing more. The life I've built doesn't allow for those kinds of dreams. What if it could? It can't. But what if Alara. He took her face in his hands, the gesture gentle despite the roughness in his voice. I appreciate what you're trying to do, really. But some things can't be changed. Some choices can't be unmade. I am who I am. This life is what I have. It doesn't have to be all you have. Doesn't it? His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. The moment I show weakness, the moment I'm distracted by dreams of something better, my enemies will move. They'll see an opening and they'll take it. Men like Sergei don't respect hesitation. They exploit it. So you just endure forever? If that's what it takes. Alara felt something crack in her chest. That's not living. That's just surviving. Sometimes survival is enough. No, it's not. She pulled back from his touch, needing distance to say what needed saying. I spent my whole life just surviving, hiding from my stepfather's rages, making myself invisible, enduring each day and telling myself it was enough. But it wasn't. It was hollow, empty, existing without actually living. That was different. You were trapped. I chose this. Did you? Or did circumstances force you onto this path and you've been telling yourself it was a choice ever since? She met his eyes. You became this person to save your mother, to pay for treatment she needed. That's not choice, that's desperation. And when she died, instead of walking away, you kept going because the empire you'd built was all you had left of her, of your purpose. Dominic's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? You keep those medical books. You read them late at night when you think no one's watching. You negotiate with dangerous men and build your empire, but part of you is still that medical student who wanted to save lives. And it's killing you, slowly. The disconnect between who you are and who you wanted to be. Alara, I'm not judging you. I'm just saying, Abbas, maybe you don't have to keep punishing yourself. Maybe you're allowed to want something different. He turned away from her, shoulders rigid with tension. You make it sound simple. It's not. I know it's not simple. Nothing worth doing is. She moved closer, placed a hand on his back. But you told me I was strong for surviving, for keeping hope alive. Maybe you could try doing the same thing. Hope. He said it like the word tasted bitter. Hope is dangerous in my world. Hope is dangerous everywhere. It's also necessary. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken things pressing down like physical force. Finally, Dominic turned back to face her. If I did this, if I somehow found a way to walk away from the Empire, to go back to school, to become the man I once planned to be, what then? You think we'd have some kind of normal life? You think my past wouldn't follow me? I think nothing about us will ever be normal, but that doesn't mean it can't be real. And if my enemies come for you, if someone decides to hurt you to get to me, then you'll protect me, the same way you've been protecting me since the moment you saw my bruises. She stepped closer, close enough to feel his breath. I'm not asking for guarantees, Dominic. I'm just asking you to consider that maybe you deserve more than this half-life you've built. His hands came up to frame her face again, and this time when he looked at her, she saw something raw and unguarded in his eyes. Vulnerability, want, fear. You're going to destroy me, he whispered, or save you. Could go either way. He kissed her then, harder than before, more desperate, like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Alara kissed him back with equal intensity, pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact, all her hope, her fear, her stubborn insistence that they could be more than their circumstances. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. I can't promise you anything, he said quietly. I can't promise I'll change or that we'll work or that any of this will end well. I'm not asking for promises. What are you asking for? Just try. Consider it. Think about whether the empire you've built is worth more than the life you actually wanted. She pulled back to meet his eyes. You saved me, Dominic. Let me try to save you too. He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. Not agreement exactly, but not refusal either. Something more complex. Possibility, maybe. Or the beginning of it. Your exam is Tuesday, he said finally, changing the subject with practiced ease. You should spend the weekend studying, not worrying about my existential crises. I can multitask. His mouth curved slightly. I'm sure you can, but humor me. Focus on your future, pass your exam, become a nurse. Some things should be simple. And us? We're anything but simple. He kissed her forehead gently. But we're real. That's enough for now. It wasn't everything Alara wanted to hear, but it was honest, and she'd learned to value honesty above pretty lies. She left the estate that night with more questions than answers, her mind churning with everything that had happened. The dangerous negotiation she'd witnessed, the conversation that followed, the way Dominic had looked at her when she suggested he could choose a different path. The lake cottage was dark when she arrived. Her mother had gone to bed early. She still tired easily despite her healing. Alara moved through the quiet rooms, making tea she didn't really want, trying to process the chaos in her head. She'd fallen for a man who lived in shadows, who negotiated with criminals and built empires on violence, who could kill without hesitation but read medical textbooks like prayers for redemption. It should have terrified her. Instead, she found herself planning, plotting, trying to figure out how to convince him that the life he'd built didn't have to be the life he kept living. She was still awake when her phone rang at 2 a.m. Dominic's name lit up the screen. Hello? Her voice was rough with exhaustion. I'm sorry. I know it's late. He paused, and she could hear something in his voice she'd never heard before. Uncertainty. I can't stop thinking about what you said. About what? About hope. About choosing differently. About deserving more than survival. Another pause. What if you're right? What if I could walk away? Alara's heart hammered. Are you serious? I don't know, maybe. I've been sitting here for hours thinking about the life I abandoned, about whether it's too late to get any of it back. His voice dropped lower. About whether I could be the kind of man you deserve. Dominic, don't tell me I'm already enough or that I'm overthinking this. Just tell me honestly. If I did this, if I somehow extricated myself from the empire and went back to medicine, would you still want me? When I'm not powerful anymore? When I can't protect you with threats and leverage? You really have to ask? Yes. Alara closed her eyes, emotion swelling in her chest. I don't want you because you're powerful. I want you because you're you. The man who saw my bruises and decided they mattered. Who reads medical books at midnight and talks about his mother with such love it breaks my heart. Who's brilliant and dangerous and kind in ways people wouldn't expect. She opened her eyes. I'd want you if you were a doctor in a free clinic. I'd want you if you were still that medical student trying to save his dying mother. Power isn't why I'm here. The silence stretched so long she thought the connection had dropped. Then, I'm going to look into it, quietly. See if there's even a path back to medical school at my age with my background. It's probably impossible, but he exhaled slowly. But I'm going to try, for you, for myself, for the man I was supposed to become. Alara felt tears prick her eyes. You mean it? I mean it. Though I need you to understand it won't be quick. I can't just walk away tomorrow. There are people who depend on me, commitments I've made. Dismantling an empire takes time, years probably. I can wait. Can you? Because I'm asking you to bet on a future that might never happen. To stay with me while I figure out how to become someone different. That's not fair to you. Let me decide what's fair to me. She gripped the phone tighter. I'm not going anywhere, Dominic, however long it takes. She could hear the smile in his voice when he spoke again. You're remarkably stubborn. You're just realizing this now? No, but I'm appreciating it more than usual. He paused. Get some sleep, Alara. You have studying to do. You too. I will, eventually. The warmth in his tone wrapped around her like a blanket. Thank you. For what? For seeing me, really seeing me. Not just the monster or the boss or the empire, the person underneath all of it. That's what love does, she said softly. It sees clearly. She heard his breath catch. Love? The word had slipped out without permission, but Alara didn't take it back. Yes, love. I know it's fast and probably crazy and definitely complicated, but that's what this is, at least for me. Another long silence. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. For me too. They said goodnight with promises to talk tomorrow, and Alara finally climbed into bed with her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Dominic Vale, feared crime boss, dangerous man, builder of empires, was going to try to change, not because he had to, because he wanted to, because she'd shown him it was possible. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be quick. There would be obstacles and setbacks and moments when the weight of his past threatened to crush any hope of a different future. But they would face it together. And for the first time since walking into his estate 6 weeks ago, Alara allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could build something that lasted. Something real. Something worth the risk. Alara passed her nursing certification exam with a score that surprised even her instructors. She found out on a Thursday afternoon, standing in the testing center's lobby with her phone pressed to her ear while the proctor read her results. 94%. Top 5% of all test takers that quarter. Certification approved, pending final paperwork. Her hands shook as she thanked the woman and ended the call. She'd done it. After years of interrupted study, of nights spent hiding from Martin's rages instead of reviewing material, of dreams deferred and delayed, she'd actually done it. The first person she wanted to tell was Dominic. She found him at the estate that evening, in the library as usual. He looked up from his laptop when she entered, and something in her expression must have given it away because he stood immediately. Well? I passed. The words came out breathless, disbelieving. 94%. I'm officially a certified nurse. His face transformed, pride and joy lighting his features in a way she'd never seen before. I knew you would. I couldn't have done it without you. The tuition support, the quiet place to study, the time you gave me to... He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, cutting off her gratitude with the simple warmth of his embrace. You did this yourself. Your intelligence, your dedication, your refusal to give up despite everything stacked against you. I just made it easier. Alara buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent, feeling the solid strength of him. Thank you anyway. You're welcome. He pulled back enough to look at her face. This calls for celebration, proper celebration. Dinner somewhere that isn't this house or the cottage. Somewhere normal people go to mark achievements. You want to take me to dinner? Is that so surprising? Yes, actually, you don't exactly seem like the type to go to restaurants. His mouth curved. I own 3 restaurants, Alara. I know how to behave in public. That's not what I meant. I just thought, with your business, with keeping things private, I've been thinking about what you said, about not just surviving, about actually living. He touched her face gently. And I want to take you somewhere nice, show you off, celebrate your accomplishment like you deserve, if you're willing to be seen in public with me. Of course I am, but are you sure? What about your enemies, people who will know you matter to me? They probably already suspect we haven't exactly been subtle around the estate. He smiled slightly. Besides, if I'm serious about changing my life, I can't keep you hidden like a secret. You deserve better than that. Alara felt warmth spread through her chest. Okay, dinner. Somewhere nice. Saturday night. Wear something beautiful. He kissed her forehead. Though you're beautiful in everything, so that's not particularly helpful advice. She laughed, the sound bubbling up unexpectedly. I'll figure it out. The next morning, Alara found an envelope on her pillow at the cottage. Inside was a credit card with her name embossed on it and a note in Dominic's precise handwriting. For the celebration dinner and anything else you need. No arguments. Her mother found her staring at it over breakfast. What's that? Clara asked, settling into her chair with only a slight wince. Her leg was healing well. The physical therapist had been pleased with her progress. Dominic gave me a credit card. Clara's eyebrows rose. That's significant. He wants to take me to dinner Saturday to celebrate the certification. And he's buying you a dress for it? Apparently. Alara turned the card over in her hands. Mom, is this crazy? Everything happening so fast? Clara was quiet for a moment, stirring honey into her tea with careful precision. 6 months ago, I would have said yes, would have warned you about men who use money to control. But Dominic, she looked up at her daughter. He's different from what I expected. How so? He hasn't asked for anything. Not from you, not from me. He gave us safety, medical care, this beautiful home, and the only thing he's demanded in return is that we accept it. Clara's expression grew thoughtful. That's not control. That's genuine care. And the way he looks at you, how does he look at me? Like you're precious, rare, something worth protecting, not because you're his possession, but because you matter. Her mother reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I was wrong about him. About what kind of man he is beneath all the danger and power. He's good to you, sweetheart, in ways I never knew to hope for. Alara felt tears prick her eyes. I love him, Mom. I know it's fast and probably insane, but I do. I know you do. I can see it. Clara smiled softly. So go buy yourself something beautiful and let him celebrate you. You've earned it. Saturday evening found Alara standing in front of the cottage mirror, barely recognizing herself. The dress was midnight blue silk, simple in cut, but elegant in execution. It draped across her shoulders and fell to just above her knees, making her look simultaneously sophisticated and young. She'd left her hair down in soft waves, applied minimal makeup, added the delicate silver earrings her mother had lent her. She looked like someone who belonged in Dominic's world. Polished, confident, no longer the invisible girl hiding behind long sleeves in silence. The car arrived precisely at 7. Not the usual sedan with tinted windows, but a sleek sports car with Dominic himself behind the wheel. He stepped out when he saw her, and the look on his face made every nervous moment of preparation worthwhile. Alara. Her name was almost reverent. You're stunning. You're not so bad yourself. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, tailored to perfection. His dark hair swept back, his gray eyes warm as they traveled over her. But it was the slight nervousness in his expression that made her heart skip, like he was actually worried about impressing her. He opened the car door for her and she slid into leather seats that smelled expensive. When he joined her, the space felt intimate despite the luxury. Where are we going? She asked as he pulled onto the main road. Ristorante Bella Vista, Italian, best view in the city. He glanced at her with a slight smile. Also, I own it, so we won't be bothered by photographers or gossip columnists. Do those bother you often? More than you'd think. People are fascinated by my private life, or the lack of one, as it's been until recently. The restaurant sat atop one of the city's tallest buildings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a skyline that glittered like scattered diamonds. The maitre d' greeted Dominic by name and led them to a private table in an alcove that somehow felt both intimate and open. Wine appeared without ordering, menus that Dominic waved away with a quiet request to the server for the chef's tasting menu. "You do this often?" Elara asked, looking around at the elegant space. "The whole mysterious owner dining at his own restaurant thing?" "Never, actually. I haven't eaten here in 2 years." He leaned back in his chair, studying her across candlelight. "I usually avoid my legitimate businesses. Too many questions about the other enterprises. But tonight, I don't care about discretion. I care about celebrating you." The first course arrived, delicate pasta in a sauce that tasted like summer. Elara took a bite and nearly groaned. "Good?" Dominic asked, amusement in his voice. "Incredible. Do you eat like this every night?" "No, most nights I eat at my desk or don't eat at all." He twirled pasta on his fork with surprising grace. "This is nice. Normal. The kind of thing people do." "Normal people who own restaurants atop skyscrapers?" "Fair point." His smile widened. "But still, it feels almost ordinary. Dinner with someone I care about, celebrating her success. No business deals or territory negotiations. Just us." They talked through course after course. Seared scallops, truffle risotto, perfectly cooked lamb. The conversation flowed easily, ranging from Elara's plans for finding work as a nurse to Dominic's memories of medical school to lighter topics like favorite books and terrible movies they secretly loved. It was only when dessert arrived, tiramisu that melted on the tongue, that the mood shifted. "I need to tell you something," Dominic said, his tone growing serious. Elara set down her fork. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. Not exactly." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I contacted the university's admissions office, quietly, through intermediaries, asked about the process for someone in my situation. Older student, left in good academic standing, wanting to complete a medical degree." Her heart stuttered. "And?" "It's possible. Complicated, but possible. I'd need to retake some prerequisite courses. Medical knowledge has evolved significantly in 15 years. Reapply formally. Submit to background checks." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "The background checks are the problem. My record is extensive." "Can you get around it?" "Maybe. Money opens doors, so does influence. And technically, I've never been convicted of anything." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Being good at what I do means being impossible to prosecute. So you could actually do this. Go back to school. Become a doctor." "In theory, but there's another problem." His expression grew troubled. "I can't walk away from the empire while still maintaining it. The two paths are incompatible, which means I need to start dismantling things, carefully, slowly, in ways that won't trigger a power vacuum and start a war." Elara squeezed his hand. "How long will that take?" "Years, probably. 3, maybe 5. I need to legitimize the businesses I can, sell off the ones I can't, make arrangements for the people who depend on me." He met her eyes. "I need to build something sustainable that doesn't require my constant presence, and all of that takes time." "I told you I can wait." "I know, but I need you to understand what you're signing up for. Years of watching me walk a tightrope between two worlds, of dealing with the danger that comes from the world I'm trying to leave, of wondering if I'll actually pull this off, or if something will happen that drags me back in permanently." "Dominic, I'm serious, Elara. This isn't romantic. It's messy and dangerous, and there are no guarantees. I could spend 5 years working toward this and still fail, still be trapped in this life." She looked at him across the candlelight, this complicated man who'd somehow become her entire world in just 2 months. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night when you saw my bruises?" "I said a lot of things." "You said you'd handle it whether I cooperated or not, because knowing what you knew, you couldn't unknow it. You couldn't let it continue." She held his gaze. "That's how I feel about this. About you. I see who you are beneath the empire. I see the man who reads medical texts like prayers, and I can't unknow that, Can't pretend I don't see the person you're meant to be. So yes, I'll wait, however long it takes. Dominic's expression cracked, revealing something raw and vulnerable beneath. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. He laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. Then he was standing, moving around the table, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. The restaurant staff politely looked away as he kissed her, deep and thorough and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to make this work, he whispered. I'm going to become the man you see when you look at me. I promise. I know you will. They left the restaurant wrapped in each other, the city lights spreading beneath them like possibilities. In the car, Dominic drove with one hand on the wheel and the other holding hers, as if he couldn't bear to break contact. The night felt perfect, crystalline, like one of those rare moments where everything aligned exactly as it should, which is why Alara should have known it couldn't last. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later, when Mrs. Chen pulled Alara aside after breakfast service. There's been an incident, the older woman said quietly, her expression grave. One of Mr. Vale's associates was found dead this morning, shot, execution style. Alara's blood ran cold. Who? Marcus Brennan. He managed the docks operation, the territory Mr. Vale negotiated with Sergei Volkov. Mrs. Chen's mouth tightened. The police are calling it gang violence, but Mr. Vale believes it was a message. From Volkov? Or from someone who doesn't like the deal they made? There are factions within Mr. Vale's organization who think he's getting soft, making too many compromises. Where is he? His study. He's been there since 4 this morning, calling everyone who might have information. Mrs. Chen touched Alara's arm gently. Be careful. He's in a dark place right now. This is the part of his life that doesn't allow for softness or hope. This is where he has to be what he's built himself into. Alara found Dominic exactly where Mrs. Chen said, standing by the study window with his phone pressed to his ear. His suit jacket was discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his tie loosened. He looked exhausted and dangerous in equal measure. I don't care about excuses, he was saying, his voice ice. I care about who pulled the trigger and who gave the order. You have 48 hours to get me that information, or I find someone who can. He ended the call and immediately dialed another number. Alara waited in the doorway, unsure whether to interrupt. He noticed her after the third call, his expression shifting from cold rage to something more complicated when he saw her. You shouldn't be here, he said. Mrs. Chen told me what happened. I'm sorry. Sorry. He set down his phone with careful precision. Marcus had a wife, 2 kids. He was one of my best people, loyal, competent, smart enough to run the docks without causing problems. His jaw clenched. And someone put 3 bullets in his head because of the deal I made with Volkov. You don't know that for sure. Yes, I do. This is a message. Either from Volkov, reneging on our agreement, or from someone in my organization who thinks I'm weak for negotiating at all. He turned to face her fully. This is what happens, Alara. This is the reality of the world I've built. Good people die because of decisions I make. You can't blame yourself for... Can't I? I'm the one who made the deal. I'm the one who left Marcus exposed. I'm the one who's been distracted lately, thinking about medical school and new futures instead of watching my territory. His voice grew harsh. This is what happens when I let myself hope. The words landed like a blow. Alara stepped into the study, closing the door behind her. Don't do that. Don't use this tragedy to justify giving up on everything we talked about. I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. A man is dead because I wasn't paying attention. A man is dead because someone made a choice to kill him. That's not on you. Everything that happens in my territory is on me. That's what being in charge means. He moved to the desk, poured whiskey despite the early hour. I need to find who did this. Make an example of them. Remind everyone why crossing me is a bad idea. I need to be the monster they fear. You're not a monster. Today I am. Today I have to be. He downed the whiskey in one swallow. You should go home, Alara. Go to the cottage. Stay there until this is resolved. I'm not leaving you. I'm not asking. I'm telling you. It's not safe here right now. Then it's not safe for you either. I can handle myself. I know you can. But you don't have to handle it alone. She crossed to where he stood, taking the empty glass from his hand. Let me help. How? This isn't nursing school or restaurant dinners or hopeful conversations about changing my life. This is violence, retaliation, the darkest part of what I do. I know. And I'm still here. He looked at her for a long moment, conflict written across his features. Then, surprisingly, he pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I'm scared, he admitted quietly. Scared that if I let myself become the man you see, more people will die. That my enemies will see weakness and exploit it. That everything I've built to protect the people who depend on me will collapse. Alara held him tight, feeling the tension in his body, the weight of responsibility he carried. What if it's the opposite? What if holding on to this life is what's making you vulnerable? If being willing to change actually makes you stronger? That's not how power works. Maybe it should be. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Find who did this. Do what you need to do. But don't use it as an excuse to abandon the future you're building. Marcus wouldn't want his death to trap you in this life forever. You didn't know him. No. But I know you. And I know you honor people by living well, not by destroying yourself with guilt. Dominic's expression shifted, something in her words landing. How are you so sure? Because that's what you taught me. When you saved me from Martin, you didn't just give me safety. You gave me permission to imagine a different future, to believe I deserved better. She touched his face gently. Let me give you the same thing. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. I don't know how to do this, how to be what I need to be for my organization while also being someone who could walk away from it. You figure it out, one day at a time, one decision at a time. She kissed him softly. And you let me stand beside you while you do it. When he opened his eyes again, they were clearer, still troubled, but no longer drowning. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. The next 48 hours were tense. Dominic worked around the clock, calling in favors, gathering information, piecing together who had killed Marcus Brennan and why. Alara stayed close, bringing him food he barely touched, making sure he slept at least a few hours, providing silent support while he navigated the dangerous waters of his empire. She learned more about his world in those 2 days than she had in all the previous weeks. Saw how he commanded loyalty through a combination of respect and fear, watched him negotiate with people who dealt in violence like currency. Observed the careful balance he maintained between being approachable enough that people trusted him and dangerous enough that they didn't cross him. It was terrifying and fascinating in equal measure. On the third day, he got the answer he'd been looking for. It wasn't Volkov, he told Alara, his voice tight with controlled rage. It was Vincent DeLuca, one of my own lieutenants. He thought the deal with the Russians made me look weak. Decided to make a statement by killing Marcus and blaming it on Volkov to start a war. What are you going to do? What I have to do. He pulled on his suit jacket, checking the gun holstered at his side. Make it very clear that betrayal has consequences. Dominic, I'm not going to kill him. He saw the fear in her eyes and his expression softened marginally. I stopped being the kind of boss who solves everything with bullets years ago, but I'm going to make sure he understands why crossing me was the worst decision of his life. He kissed her forehead. Stay here. I'll be back before dark. True to his word, Dominic returned 6 hours later. He looked exhausted, but somehow lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. It's done, he said simply. What happened? Vincent is on a plane to Miami with $50,000 and instructions never to return. If he does, he knows what waits for him. Dominic loosened his tie, sank into one of the leather chairs. I also made some calls, redistributed his territory among people I trust, reinforced the deal with Volkov, sent a message that betrayal won't be tolerated but that I'm not looking for blood unless absolutely necessary. You let him live. I let him leave. There's a difference. He looked up at her. The old me would have put a bullet in his head as an example. But I kept thinking about what you said, about honoring Marcus by living well instead of perpetuating the cycle of violence. So I chose differently. Alara moved to him, settling into his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. I'm proud of you. Don't be. I'm still the same man who runs a criminal empire. No. You're the man who's choosing to be better, one decision at a time. She kissed him softly. That matters. He held her close, and they stayed like that for a long time, the quiet of the library wrapping around them like sanctuary. Finally, Dominic spoke again. I made another decision while I was out. What's that? I'm accelerating the timeline, not dismantling everything in 5 years, starting now, actively. I've already begun talks with some legitimate business contacts about buying out the dock's operation, making it legal, clean. Laura's heart skipped. You're serious? I'm serious. Marcus's death showed me that waiting is dangerous. Every day I maintain this empire is another day someone could die because of my choices. I can't control everything, but I can start moving towards something better. He met her eyes. I submitted my application to the university's medical school, explained my situation, asked for consideration. When? This morning, before I dealt with Vincent. His mouth curved slightly. Figured if I was going to make changes, I should commit to all of them. Alara felt tears prick her eyes. What if they say no? Then I apply somewhere else. Keep applying until someone says yes. Because you were right. I deserve more than just survival, and so do the people around me. He touched her face gently. Thank you for seeing me, for refusing to let me give up, for being stubborn and hopeful and brave enough to love someone like me. Someone like you is easy to love. Liar, but he smiled when he said it, though I appreciate the sentiment. They sat together in the gathering darkness, holding each other, both aware that the road ahead would be difficult, that dismantling an empire wouldn't be easy or quick, that there would be setbacks and dangers and moments when the past threatened to drag them back. But they would face it together, and somehow, impossibly, that felt like enough. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late spring, 4 months after Dominic had submitted his application. Alara found him in the library, holding the envelope like it might explode. He'd been staring at it for who knows how long, the wax seal still unbroken, his expression unreadable. You should open it, she said from the doorway. He looked up, and she saw fear in his eyes. Raw, unguarded fear. What if it's a rejection? Then you apply somewhere else. We talked about this. I know, but this one. He turned the envelope over in his hands. This is where I started, where my mother was so proud of me, where I was supposed to become someone who mattered. Alara crossed to him, taking the envelope gently from his fingers. You already matter. This just determines the path you take. She held his gaze. But you need to know. Not knowing is worse. He nodded slowly. Open it. I can't. She broke the seal carefully, unfolded the heavy paper inside, and read the first line. Then she looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Congratulations, Dr. Vale. Pending completion of prerequisite courses. The sound he made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe, and she felt his shoulders shake. I got in, he whispered against her hair. They actually accepted me. Of course they did. You were top of your class. You're brilliant. I'm also a criminal. They did a background check. They know what I am. They know who you were and who you're choosing to become. She pulled back to look at his face, seeing joy and disbelief warring there. This is real, Dominic. You're going back to medical school. He kissed her then, deep and grateful and full of something that felt like hope finally allowed to breathe. When they broke apart, he was smiling, a real smile that transformed his entire face. I need to tell Mrs. Chen and arrange for the prerequisite courses and figure out how to balance school with dismantling an empire. He laughed, the sound almost giddy. I don't know how to do any of this. You'll figure it out. You always do. The next 6 months were a study in controlled chaos. Dominic enrolled in the prerequisite courses, biochemistry, advanced anatomy, updated pharmacology. He attended lectures in the evenings, studied between meetings with his various business interests, somehow managed to maintain his empire while simultaneously working to legitimize it. Alara watched him transform. Not all at once, but gradually. The hard edges that came from years of violence and control began to soften. He smiled more, laughed easier, looked less like a man carrying the weight of impossible choices and more like someone discovering he was allowed to want things. She'd found work at Mercy General, the same hospital where her mother had recovered. It felt right somehow, working in a place that represented both their old life and their new beginning. The hours were long and the work demanding, but she loved it. Loved making a difference. Loved the sense of purpose that came from helping people. They saw each other when they could. Stolen mornings over coffee, late nights when they both finally came home exhausted. Weekends where they'd hole up at the lake cottage and pretend the outside world didn't exist. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Clara had fully recovered by midsummer, her leg healed and her spirit lighter than Alara had seen in years. She'd started working again, not as a maid, but in the administrative office of one of Dominic's newly legitimate businesses, a property management company that handled his real estate holdings. "It's strange," Clara said one evening over dinner at the cottage. "Working for him in a normal job, having a salary and benefits and a 401k, it doesn't feel like the same man who saved us." "He's not," Alara said. "He's becoming someone different." "Better?" "Just more himself. The person he was always meant to be before circumstances forced him onto a different path." Her mother studied her across the table. "You're happy, really happy. I haven't seen you like this since you were a little girl." Alara felt warmth spread through her chest. "I am. Terrified sometimes because I keep waiting for something to go wrong, but happy." "Good. You deserve it, sweetheart. Both of you do." The first real test came in early autumn. Sergei Volkov requested a meeting, not at the estate, but at a neutral location downtown. A restaurant neither of them owned, public enough to discourage violence, but private enough for honest conversation. Dominic told Alara about it the night before. "What does he want?" she asked. "I don't know, but Volkov doesn't request meetings unless something significant has changed." He was packing his briefcase with documents, his movements tense. "Could be that he's heard about me legitimizing businesses. Could be that he wants to renegotiate our terms. Could be a threat." You think he'd hurt you?" "I think he's unpredictable, which makes him dangerous." Dominic paused, turning to look at her. "If something happens—" Don't talk like that. Alara, I need you to listen. If something happens to me, Mrs. Chen has instructions, financial security for you and your mother, legal protection, everything you need." He crossed to where she sat, kneeling in front of her chair. "I've made arrangements. You'll be safe regardless of what happens." She took his face in her hands. "Nothing's going to happen. You're meeting him in public, you're bringing security, and you're too smart to let him catch you off guard. I hope you're right." "I'm always right. You should know that by now." He smiled despite the tension. "Arrogant. I learned from the best." The meeting was scheduled for noon the next day. Alara couldn't focus at work, her mind constantly drifting to what might be happening across town. She checked her phone obsessively, waiting for a message that never came. Finally, at 2:30, her phone rang. "It's done," Dominic said without preamble. "We're good." The relief made her knees weak. What did he want? To warn me, actually, about some of my former associates who aren't happy about the legitimization. Apparently, they've been making noise about staging a coup, taking over my territory while I'm distracted with school. Alara's heart sank. "What are you going to do?" "Already did it. Spent the last 2 hours making calls, moving pieces, ensuring loyalty. The people who matter are with me. The ones who aren't—" He paused. "They're being offered the same deal I gave Vincent. Leave quietly with compensation or face consequences." "And they're accepting?" "Most of them, the smart ones anyway." His voice softened. Volkov also said something interesting. He said, I was brave for choosing a different path, that he wished he'd had the courage to do the same thing 30 years ago. Really? Really? Apparently he wanted to be a pianist, concert level, but his family had other plans. Dominic sounded almost sad. He told me not to waste the opportunity, that men like us rarely get second chances at the lives we were supposed to live. He's right. I know, which is why I'm accelerating everything. I've got buyers lined up for most of the illegal operations. The docks are officially sold to a legitimate shipping company. The papers finalized next week. The protection rackets are being dissolved. By this time next year, everything I control will be legal. Alara felt something settle in her chest. You're really doing it. I'm really doing it, thanks to you. That evening, they celebrated with takeout Chinese food at the lake cottage, sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over water that turned gold and pink in the fading light. I've been thinking, Dominic said, setting down his container of lo mein, about after medical school, where I want to practice. And? There's a neighborhood on the east side, low income, underserved, high rates of chronic illness, no good medical facilities within walking distance. People there go to emergency rooms for basic care because they can't afford regular doctors. You want to open a clinic there? I want to open a free clinic, or close to free. Sliding scale based on ability to pay. Nothing turned away for lack of money. He looked at her. It's what I should have done in the first place, instead of building an empire, using resources to help people instead of control them. Alara's eyes filled with tears. That's perfect. That's exactly right. It'll take time. I need to finish school, do my residency, get licensed. But I've already started looking at properties, buildings that could be converted, grants and funding sources. His enthusiasm was infectious. There's an old community center that's been abandoned for 5 years. Perfect location, right in the heart of the neighborhood. I'm negotiating to buy it now. How long until you could open it? 5 years? Maybe 6. Depends on how quickly I can get through school and residency. He reached for her hand. I was hoping you might want to be part of it. Use your nursing certification there. Help me build something that actually matters. Are you asking me to work with you? I'm asking you to build a future with me. All of it. The clinic, the life, everything. He turned to face her fully. I know we haven't talked about specifics, about what happens long term, but I need you to know you're not just someone I'm dating. You're the person I want to build everything with. Alara felt her heart expand in her chest. I want that too. All of it. Even though I'm a terrible risk, former crime boss with a complicated past and probably more baggage than any reasonable person should deal with. Especially because of that. You're the most interesting person I've ever met. She kissed him softly. Besides, I'm not exactly uncomplicated myself. Abuse survivor with trust issues and a tendency to overthink everything? We're quite a pair. The best kind of pair. They sat together as darkness fell, wrapped in each other, and plans for a future that was finally starting to feel real. The transition wasn't seamless. There were setbacks and challenges, moments when the weight of his past threatened to drag Dominic back into old patterns. In November, one of his former lieutenants tried to restart the protection rackets, using Dominic's name without permission. Dominic had to handle it, firmly, decisively, in ways that reminded everyone he was still dangerous when he needed to be. Alara saw the toll it took on him, the way he came home that night looking exhausted and defeated, like he'd taken 10 steps backward. I thought I was past this, he said, slumped in the library chair. Thought I could just walk away clean, but they keep pulling me back. You handled it without violence, without anyone getting hurt. That's progress. I threatened him, Alara, made it very clear what would happen if he didn't stop. That's not the man I'm trying to become. You set boundaries, enforced consequences for someone using your name to hurt people. That's not the same as the violence you used to use. She knelt in front of him. You're allowed to protect what you've built. That doesn't make you the old Dominic. He pulled her into his lap, holding her tight. I don't know what I'd do without you. Probably fall back into old patterns and convince myself it was necessary. Good thing you don't have to find out. In December, Dominic completed his prerequisite courses with perfect marks. The medical school confirmed his full acceptance for the spring semester, and he celebrated by taking Alara to the same restaurant where they'd had their first real date. I start in January, he said over wine and pasta. Full course load, it's going to be intense. You'll manage. You always do. I'm also officially out of the criminal business as of next week. The last property sale closes on Friday. After that, everything I own is legitimate. He looked almost disbelieving. Everything legal, normal, the kind of businesses that file taxes and follow regulations. How does it feel? Terrifying, liberating, like I'm standing at the edge of a cliff and choosing to jump without knowing if there's water below. He reached across the table for her hand. But I'm jumping, finally. I'm proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you. You know that, right? You're the reason any of this is possible. You're the one doing the work. But you're the one who made me believe it was worth doing. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I love you, Elara. I don't think I've said it enough. I love you for seeing me, for refusing to let me give up, for being brave enough to stay when any sane person would have run. I love you too, even when you're being stubborn and difficult and convinced you don't deserve good things. Especially then. Especially then. Spring semester started with a pace that left them both breathless. Dominic threw himself into medical school with the intensity he'd once directed at building his empire. He studied constantly, attended every lecture, asked questions that made his younger classmates look at him with a mixture of respect and intimidation. Elara continued at Mercy General, working long shifts and falling into bed exhausted most nights. But they made time for each other. Morning coffee before impossible days, late-night phone calls when they were both too tired to do anything but talk, weekends at the cottage where they could pretend the world consisted of just the two of them. It was hard, demanding, sometimes overwhelming, but it was also everything they'd hoped for. In March, Clara announced she was dating someone, a widower she'd met through the property management company. A kind man, Elara learned when she met him, who treated her mother with gentle respect and made her laugh in ways Elara had never heard. Is this weird? Clara asked over lunch one Saturday. Me dating? At my age? It's wonderful, Mom. You deserve to be happy. I never thought I'd trust another man after Martin. After everything. Her mother's eyes grew distant. But Richard is different, patient, kind. He doesn't try to control me or make decisions for me. He just enjoys my company. That's how it should be, Clara smiled. I think Dominic helped me see that. Watching how he treats you with respect and care and genuine partnership, it showed me that not all powerful men are dangerous. Some of them just use their power to protect people they love. Elara felt tears prick her eyes. He's going to be a great doctor. He already is, in all the ways that matter. He heals people just by choosing to care about them. Summer brought new developments. Dominic finished his first year of medical school ranked second in his class. He would have been first, he told Elara ruefully, if he hadn't been balancing coursework with finalizing the sale of his last few properties. Second is still incredible, she reminded him. I'm competitive. Sue me. You're impossible is what you are. But she said it with love, watching him pore over anatomy texts in the cottage living room while she worked on her own continuing education materials. They'd fallen into a rhythm, a life that felt surprisingly normal despite its unconventional origins. Work and study and quiet evenings. Dinner with her mother and Richard. Occasional visits from Mrs. Chen, who'd become something like a friend now that Dominic no longer needed a head housekeeper. The estate itself had been transformed. With the criminal enterprise dissolved, Dominic had converted it into a research foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to funding medical education for underprivileged students and supporting free clinics in underserved areas. It feels right, he told Elara one evening, showing her the paperwork. Using the house for something good, something that actually helps people instead of just intimidating them. Your mother would be proud. His expression grew soft. I think she would be. I like to think she'd approve of all of this, the choices I'm making. She'd love it. And she'd love that you're finally becoming the person she always believed you could be. In August, on the anniversary of the day they'd met, Dominic took Elara back to the library where they'd had so many of their important conversations. I have something for you, he said, looking nervous in a way she rarely saw. You didn't need to get me anything. Yes, I did. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Elara's heart stopped. Dominic, let me say this first. He took her hands, his gray eyes intense on hers. A year ago, I was a man with no future, just an endless present of managing an empire I'd built out of desperation and maintained out of obligation. I'd convinced myself I didn't deserve more. That hope was dangerous and wanting things would only lead to disappointment. Dominic, then you walked into my house with bruises you tried to hide and eyes that saw right through every wall I'd built. You looked at me, really looked at me, and saw someone worth saving, someone capable of more than violence and control, and you refused to let me settle for less than I deserved. He opened the box, revealing a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the library light. I don't know what the future holds. I'm still in school, still figuring out how to be someone other than who I was, but I know I want to spend it with you. Building that clinic, helping people, creating a life that actually matters. His voice grew rough. Marry me, Alara. Let me spend the rest of my life proving you were right to believe in me. Alara was crying before he finished, nodding before she could form words. Yes, she finally managed. Yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, he rested his forehead against hers. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the cottage, with just Clara and Richard, Mrs. Chen, and a few close friends Dominic had made in medical school. Nothing elaborate or showy, just honest promises made by two people who'd fought hard for the right to stand there together. Alara wore a simple white dress and carried white roses. Dominic wore a suit that had nothing to do with empire building and everything to do with being a man who chose to show up for the life he'd built. When the officiant asked if he took Alara to be his wife, his voice was steady and sure. I do, absolutely. And when Alara made her own promises, to love and honor and stand beside him through whatever came next, she meant every word with a ferocity that surprised her. They were building something real, something that had nothing to do with fear or survival or violence, something born from choice and hope and the stubborn refusal to accept that the past had to define the future. The years that followed were full and demanding and occasionally difficult, but they faced them together. Dominic completed medical school with honors, did his residency at Mercy General alongside Alara, and finally got his medical license at age 40. The free clinic opened 2 months later in the converted community center he'd bought years earlier. East Side Community Health Center, the sign read. No one turned away. Services based on ability to pay. Alara worked there as head nurse, managing a small staff and treating patients who'd never had access to proper health care. Dominic saw patients 6 days a week, using everything he'd learned, in medical school and in his years running an empire, to actually help people. They treated chronic illnesses, injuries, provided prenatal care and pediatrics. They partnered with social services to address the underlying causes of poor health. They built relationships with the community, earning trust one patient at a time. It was exhausting work, underpaid and underappreciated by the broader medical establishment. But it mattered. Every patient they saw, every person they helped, it mattered. Clara and Richard got married eventually, settling into a comfortable life that had nothing to do with fear or violence. Clara volunteered at the clinic twice a week, greeting patients and managing paperwork, finally able to use her organizational skills for something meaningful. Mrs. Chen retired to a small house near the lake, but visited often. She'd become something like family, the wise elder who'd seen them through their strangest and hardest times. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Alara and Dominic stood on the cottage porch watching the sunset, both tired from long shifts at the clinic. Do you ever miss it? Alara asked. The empire? The power? Being someone everyone feared? Dominic was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. Clear rules. Problem solved with force or money. No uncertainty about who I was or what I was supposed to do. But I wouldn't go back. Not for anything. He pulled her closer. That man had power, but no purpose. Control, but no real connections. I was surviving, not living. And I didn't even realize it until you showed me there was another option. We showed each other. Fair point. He kissed the top of her head. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Doing exactly what I was always meant to do. Healing people instead of hurting them. Building something that will outlast me. Loving you. Good answer. I've had practice. They stood together as darkness fell, comfortable in the silence that came from years of knowing each other, from choosing each other every day despite the complications and challenges. Inside the cottage, Clara and Richard were making dinner, family Sunday tradition that had developed over the years. Through the window, Alara could see them laughing, comfortable in a way her mother had never been with Martin. We did good, she said softly. We did, Dominic agreed. Both of us. We took broken pieces and built something whole. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no perfect resolution, no moment where all problems disappeared. They still worked too hard and worried about funding and dealt with the occasional reminder of Dominic's past when someone recognized him. But they were happy, purposeful, living lives that mattered in ways neither of them had imagined possible when they'd first met in that grand estate a lifetime ago. Alara Voss had walked into Dominic Vale's world expecting to stay invisible. Instead, she'd found someone who saw her completely and chose to stand in the light with her. And Dominic Vale, feared crime boss turned healer, had discovered that true power wasn't about control or fear. It was about choosing who you wanted to become and having the courage to walk that path, even when it meant leaving everything familiar behind. Together, they'd built something neither violence nor survival could touch, something real and lasting and worth every risk they'd taken to get here. A future shaped not by the past that tried to define them, but by the choices they made every single day. To heal, to help, to love, to live.